Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion. Second hour is something we're going to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about how to get more out of office hours and really how it's designed and how it's designed to help you. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Mitch, what do we have?
Tony Mobley's in with our first question here. It's from Noonan, Georgia. And the question from Tony is, what are the panelists' thoughts on the Best Buy program on leasing Mac computers for 3 years?
Go ahead, Tony.
So this is something that popped up yesterday online, and I wanted to share it with the community and get their thoughts. So I'm going to share the Best Buy page, and that is the Best Buy page, and the options are MacBook Air M1, MacBook Air 2 M2, MacBook Pro 13 M2, MacBook Pro 14-inch, MacBook Pro 16-inch, and the prices associated with them for 36 months is $19.99 a month, and so on and so on. And it looks like it's a pretty good deal. And my use case is primarily with the house of worship, possibly using this as a device. So I just wanted to get the panel's thoughts.
Go ahead, Jason.
As a rule, I try not to lease computers. I have corporate clients who can't avoid it. But as a rule, I don't know, having a computer that is somebody else's official property just kind of rubs me the wrong way. But if it's the only way you can afford what you need, then I don't know, go for it.
Good, Bill.
One thing to consider is whether they're doing an open-end or a closed-end lease. If they're doing an open-end lease, the residual value is going to be far different than if they're using a closed-end lease. You may get to the end of the lifespan of this device and decide, I like it, the lease is over, and they're going to offer you whether you want to buy that piece of equipment or not. Look into the difference carefully, because you can end up with a pretty substantial bill if you decide you want to buy it at the end when your lease term is over. And if you don't want to do that, then you have to negotiate either a new lease or do a new one. In cars, I tried that once in my career. Tried it once. That was Mitchell.
Yeah, Bill is exactly right, because what happens is it turns into a conditional sale if you end up buying it off of a lease, and then you have to pay the taxes back if you wrote it off.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the primary reason to use a lease, in my opinion, is for tax purposes or for how your books are managed, and how you want to have those applied as far as amortization. I think that outside of that, I don't recommend it. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and there's really two things we're talking about here. There's just the concept of leasing it, and I think I agree with everything said. The other part is leasing it from Best Buy. Personal preference, I'd be hesitant of that as well, because, or at least really look at the fine print, what might they count as a problem that you have to pay for, because they make money on their services. So, are you going to have some kind of repair bill or reinstallation bill or anything else? At least be aware of the fine print. I haven't looked at it. So I'd rather recommend buying something directly from Apple. And then based on those principles, how do you want to bill it? And then again, you're depending on, unless it's someone really cutting edge, they might end up liking it at the end of 3 years and want to keep it.
Yeah, and we definitely leased a lot of computers from Apple, and it made sense inside of my last company's, the way we managed our books and everything else. Just having a lease made a lot more sense than necessarily owning all of the computers. So it did make sense for us, and you might want to look at the Apple leasing program as well. I don't know how small that goes. I mean, we were leasing 40 computers, so it was a lot of machines. But again, it made sense for us in that respect. But you can take a look at that. But I don't buy Apple products from anyone other than Apple. It's just so much easier to manage when it comes to Apple Care, when it comes to getting things fixed. Everything works better if you just buy it from an Apple directly. And working with, I've tried buying from lots of other organizations. So I'm not saying this out of superstition. I'm saying it out of experience. Just buy it from the Apple store.
And if I could add, just
from the Apple.
Real quick, I think, just checking real quick, because I didn't think there was a minimum in terms of units. It looks like there's a dollar value. So I think at a quick glance, it looks like as long as you're spending $4,000, they don't care how you distribute that.
Yeah. So, I would check that out. The Apple, just go into an Apple store and ask for the Apple Business contact, and that can start. You might want to start there and see if you fit into a model there that works. I will say that the Apple leasing program is great. Next question.
Next question in from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Mac OS Ventura just dropped. Who has installed it, and what issues, if any, do you have so far?
Javier?
I have installed it. I've been using the beta for some time, and I really like some of the stuff, like the continuity camera is working great. All the editing messages in messages, I really liked it, because what we use most in Mexico is WhatsApp. So I was missing the delete message that WhatsApp has that Messages doesn't have. But now that we have the edit messages, I think I'm gonna sway some people over to Messages that I really want to do it. The troubles I've run into are especially audio troubles, with loopback, especially it's not as stable as with other versions. I may think it's a tool that's so wired into the system that maybe just some things broke things. So if you turn on things on and off when you are using them, they glitch out. And the other troubles I found were networking issues. Like this morning, all my devices were working perfectly for this session, and my computer, either Ethernet or Wi-Fi, weren't going anywhere, so I had to reboot. And when I rebooted, everything was great. So I think there's some stuff in the back still.
Yeah, anything that does something fancy with the operating system that doesn't follow Apple's guidelines is usually something that is broken, at least at the beginning. If not the whole time, but at least at the very beginning of an update, you'll notice that they don't work quite right, because they have to rewrite so many things, because they're not just following along Apple's guidelines. This gets into the discussion we had with Zoom ISO and how it handles audio with loopback, and the fact that it's following the rules exactly the way Apple outlines them. It creates a little confusion for people who don't understand that they have to create those outputs in loopback. But that's because Zoom ISO is playing by the rules, and that makes it easier to move from one update to another. Go ahead, John.
I'm on a 2017 iMac Pro. I did a clean install because my machine is 5 years old and it hadn't been clean updated. So I updated it, and just like Javier just said, it was really interesting. I installed loopback and audio hijack, and they installed, but Ace said it couldn't install properly. And then I had to go in system preferences and click the thing, publisher in system preferences. It's not called system preferences anymore. But other than that, it's been fine. I'm about 80% back to normal. So I'll keep you posted.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I think it probably gets a little bit of a markdown in the plays well with others category at this point, but that's just something that's going to happen, I think, over time, as you suggest. It did recognize the little iPhone almost immediately as a USB connected video source. I found some audio hijack difficulties as well in levels, and there's some interesting voices added now in accessibility voiceovers. There's more than a dozen different voices, and each one of them plays a little snippet to let you understand how the voice will sound. And some of those test recordings are rather interesting. I direct your attention to Exotic and Boings in particular.
Go ahead, Tom.
The only issue I came up with was it rerouted my sound in Unity comms. And once I fixed that, everything's been fine.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I have a lot of computers, and I've maintained a beta version of both an Apple Silicon and an Intel chipset for, I don't know, about 3 months now. The only major issue is loopback. Other than that, if you're just a standard user, I think you really won't have issues. But, I don't use a lot of popular apps. I don't use Chrome, for example, at least not on those systems. So, yeah, I'd say be wary, and in production, never, ever.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
I am good. I have no issues so far. I've updated everything that I have that's Apple.
Yeah, I'm probably going to wait for a while. At least I might put it on one of my computers, but I'm going to probably give it a couple months, maybe till the end of the year, to let it kind of shake out. And I was much more aggressive last year or the year before. I can't remember which one it was, but I definitely felt like I paid paid a heavy price for jumping in early. And I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that I do work with a lot of production software that is quirky in the way it manages a lot of the resources. And so letting them kind of sort out all the things that they're doing, I think is useful for me. So I'll get back to you when I actually upgrade one of these machines. Next question.
From Chris Reidner in Lafayette, Indiana. Chris says, I'm trying to find a portable desk kind of like a link to Amazon, but I'd preferred a wider work top, but it has to be medium car or SUV transportable, aiming for 36 to 40 inches. What are your thoughts?
Courtney?
Yeah, well, the one he's talking about, it looks something like this, but, you might look under camping tables. And I found one like this. This folds flat. It has a little mesh underneath here so you can put your stuff underneath. And it folds flat like a little briefcase, so it will fit into any car. So that might be a better route to go, and you can find them on Amazon. So they're about, I don't know, check about the price there. They may not be available now.
When I saw that, I thought, it's kind of cool, but there's something wrong with it. And I realized that you can't put two with a trapezoidal top next to each other successfully. But I wonder if that just has a couple of leg screws underneath it that attach the top. If so, if you rotated that top 180 degrees, you might have a nice little toot spread that kind of like became a little bridge for you. I don't know. I was just playing around with it. It's an interesting looking device.
I think that a lot of the things that I look for in mobile tables is generally deals with stability. What drives me crazy is things moving a little bit. So while I may go for something small, I oftentimes want it to be heavier. So I want it to be metal legs, wooden top. It could be, there's a bunch of stuff on Amazon that you'll see that are like 30 inches wide, maybe 18 inches deep, but they're all metal, all wood, and that's going to be a lot easier to work off of than something moving all the time. I do have, for a lot of other things like catering and so on and so forth, we have little plastic tables that fold in half, and then the legs fold inside of that. And those can be very small, and you can use them, but I wouldn't work off of them. Go ahead, Jason.
I've seen a fair number of tables that work really well. I'm with Alex. It kind of drives me nuts when there's one that folds in the middle, because for some reason, no matter how reinforced they are, they always have a little bit of flex, and that drives me nuts. I would look on B&H and just see if you can straddle two C-stands, or, there are a lot of really, really sturdy things you can do if you have even a little bit of grip equipment.
Next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas asks, would it be possible to be presentable, even show-worthy, on a Chromebook? What accessories would you need?
Go ahead, Ken. Oh, you're muted, Ken. Ken, you're muted.
How did that happen?
It was my fault. So someone was breathing into the mic, so I started muting people until it went away. so it was totally my fault. So I was
all is forgiven.
Blink, blink, blink. He's trying to figure out who was making that noise. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. I think presentable depends on who you're presenting to. Here, maybe not, but most of the issue, I think you can do any one thing with a Chromebook without too much trouble. I'd put a better camera on it, I suppose, because I don't think any Chromebook comes up to 1080, but you could probably do one application with a Chromebook and present yourself quite adequately. I run a Zoom meeting sometimes with a 2012 Intel ThinkPad with an external camera, and it will do that one thing. So I say drive yourself silly, but don't try to do everything at once with a Chromebook.
I think if you want to be on a Chromebook while doing this, you can put it on the seat and sit on it, and it will raise you up a little bit, and so that your head height is the correct height to make this actually work. But I think that's about as close as a Chromebook's going to get you to being presentable in this show. Next question.
Oh, sorry. Next question in from Laura Thompson in Beaumont, Texas. I was just offered Ventura on my MacBook Pro M1. What different look and feel?
Go ahead, Jason.
The overall UX, UI is not terribly different, with one notable exception, which is system preferences, now system settings, is in a list format. If you are visually impaired, I would tread lightly and be very familiar with Spotlight, which, by the way, has a beautiful facelift.
Yeah, and Laura, we'll be interested to see once you get updated, and for you and some of the other folks, and Harshid and so on and so forth, your feedback on how the new OS treats you, and what you think. I think that Apple generally has improvements for accessibility in every OS, so we'll be really interested to get your feedback from both of you. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asked, with at-home workflows becoming more and more mainstream, could you see broadcasters, production houses subsidizing infrastructure improvements to their employees' residences? For example, backup power, multiple internet connections, etc.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, they do this for hosts that that do work from home, especially in radio. They will have remote operations and digital lines installed in the houses of those people that want to work at home or need to work at home. And I find also that the networks, especially during COVID, were installing and upgrading several of their hosts that appeared regularly on cable news, et cetera, home setups to be better cameras and better connections and good microphones so that they could call in their show from home or at least from a remote studio where several of them would set up satellite studios where they could come in from in their local town.
Go, John.
Although not in production business, my sister works for the county of San Diego, and they spent a lot of money outfitting people so that they could work from their houses, extra bandwidth, et cetera, et cetera.
Bill? Bill, you're muted. Bill, you're muted. Sorry, that was part of my carpet bombing of my mute bombing. So anyway, yeah, you're muted in Zoom.
There we go. Sorry about that. So my comment was that if you're important enough, the answer is probably yes. If you're a host or want part of a small panel. But remember, if a company has 100 employees, right now they buy one system, even though it's much bigger than everybody else's for getting the word out. Turning that around and having to do 100 so that all their people can work from home, I'm not sure if that's going to pencil out for the back end people, particularly, and this is going to be a problem for a few years, if they've made significant investments in their offices before the pandemic came along. That may be amortized over 10 years, and they're finding themselves in a bind because they're still paying for more office space now than they need as more people migrate to work from home, but they're in contractual arrangements for that are going to last maybe a decade.
Yeah. For the most part, we've found that that production there have definitely been a lot of people that are still in production that are working from their house or working remotely, and the companies that are working with them have definitely invested already in their internet, their remote power, sending them hardware. So it may not be for every average employee, but definitely for the production people, and that started before COVID, actually, of experimenting with REMI. And now it's just accelerating. And so there's, it depends on who you are, like whether you're worth equipping at home. But that is definitely not the future, but definitely part of the future. Next question.
Brody Brazil from San Francisco, California. Brody asked, using Presonus's universal control software on my Mac to control a Revelator IO24 interface, I like to make Stream Deck activate the mute on channel 1, but there is no hotkey for the universal control software. How can I make this happen?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, by the way, this is the Brody on YouTube who does or a bunch of good videos on the Sennheiser MKH416 mic. I can, am I good to share my screen here? I can actually show you real quick a workaround because I don't think it's super powerful. The software is super powerful, but there's so many things that they have not done in terms of scripting, letting other things control it, let alone even any accessibility. And so you can't even kind of work around it. So the workaround that I did is I created a preset, and it has physical buttons on the front for 2 different presets per mic channel, and you can enable it to use both. And for one of the presets, I just threw everything at it. Extreme gating, compression limiter, so nothing is getting through. So now you have a physical button. You can hit that second button or first for the preset. That preset virtually instantly kicks in, and now nothing is getting through that mic.
Jason?
Another way to go about this is with Companion IO. There's a guy on GitHub who has an unofficial plugin specifically for the Revelator IO24. I put the link in Makana, and if he hasn't supported it yet, reach out to him directly. I'm pretty sure he'll add it, but I bet it's in there.
Good, Bill.
And really quickly, I just will never use anything from mic mute that doesn't have tactile feedback. And what I mean by that is that on the Little Rolls mic mute that I use, the button goes down and I can feel that it's down. When the button comes up, I can feel that it's up. So I know the state it's in without looking at it. Anything like those Stream Decks, I can't tell without looking at it whether the lights are on or off. And I just don't think it's use appropriate.
Next question.
From Colin McCahey in Dublin, Ireland, recorded a video podcast on Blackmagic workflow, camera to deck, and editing in DaVinci Resolve. Is Fairlight good enough for mastering audio for both video and podcast audio distribution? Or do I need to do a separate master for podcast audio?
Go, Jason.
Oh, it absolutely is sufficient for the mastering portion. Where it's going to fall apart is the metadata. Logic's metadata is just perfectly tuned for podcasting. So try to A/B it if you can. It's inexpensive to get Logic, and I don't think you'll regret it.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, Jason is absolutely correct. Fairlight is a great program, and it's always been around as a product for quite some time, even before Blackmagic got them. So they've only improved it. So it's a good recording program. I can't speak to the metadata.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it should be fine for recording and mastering. I worked at a recording studio that recorded everything on Fairlight. And that was back when it was basically a hardware-based system before Blackmagic bought them, and they were DSP-based. So you'd have just basically a PC with their custom DSP card in it. But PCs have gotten so much faster these days that the software-only version works quite well for mastering, and all the tools and everything are in there for doing that, and you shouldn't have any problem. As far as the metadata exporting, it depends on where you're uploading to. A lot of the sites like YouTube and everything else puts the metadata on there if you provide them with the information before you upload it. So I think it should be fine.
Fairlight absolutely can manage doing a podcast. So if you're doing something really complex, you may move to Pro Tools. For something like that, music is still more of Logic is pretty good at music as far as putting that stuff together there. And I use Logic for the podcast that I work on, but that's mostly because I've been using it for a while. But I'm definitely looking at doing more in Fairlight just to make sure that I know how it works. And we do use it for more complex channel mapping for some of the stuff that we're doing. So it's very powerful as far as the tools that are available to you. The next question.
From Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana, Viozen Selfie Live Floor Stand, and there's a link to it. What are your thoughts, alternatives, pros, and cons for use in a library or as a portable studio setup?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know. Looking at it for a portable studio setup, here's what it looks like. It's kind of a vertical post, and it looks like it's got these cast metal feet on it, which would make it cast metal and something spread out like that really tough for portable operation. And the fact that it's cantilever design, you've got your laptop sitting off here to the side. So if you're got a heavy laptop or something, I'd worry about the thing being tipped over. I'd go for more like the camping table that I showed earlier might be a better thing for putting it out portable. But if you want something that looks weird and attracts attention, by all means, get that Viozen Selfie.
Go ahead, Bill.
I had to do a gig here where I had to have a portable rig, so I made something semi like that. That's what it looked like. Actually, the form factor I found pretty useful. If you're going to stand on your feet and do voiceover all day long, those kind of things work really well. So I'd say give it a shot if you think it's going to fit your needs.
Next question.
From Matthias Utilia from Helsinki, Finland, where can I find more information about LUFS meter used in office hours? Tips and tricks to setting up LUFS metering to workflow.
Go ahead, Javier.
The one we use in office hours is called Waves Loudest Meter. I'm going to post in the chat. Now it's $35, so it's like no excuse to not buy it. And more than tips and tricks, what I would recommend you is to see the presets. It has a lot of presets for different standards for like European and American broadcasting and everything. So like run a couple of audio like music and maybe something in like a video you have, and just speak through it, and you can learn a lot of how it reacts to different where the threshold for different standards. Like something is like on top, where it should like be like the middle, and all of that. So like look at the manual, and there's a lot of standards. So read the manual, check the standards, and put some audio through it.
Next question.
And it's from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Under the latest Mac OS, do we still have the notification dot on the second screen?
Go ahead, Ken.
Why, yes, we do. I'm running a 2019 MacBook Intel. I have 2 external screens and the internal screen, and I have 3 orange dots. Remember, we paid big bucks for that. It's a feature, not a bug.
Oh my gosh, I can tell you, someone's pretty committed to it at Apple. It's not like people haven't been telling them that, including me, that haven't been telling them that that's a horrible idea. It's dumb, and we should be able to have some way to turn it off somewhere in security preferences. You can run a script that will disable it. So, and we do believe that no one has disabled that script. So it appears that it's kind of left that if you're in production and you need to hack it and knock it out, it's still available. And I'm going to start guessing, given that it's been here for a while, that Apple's going to leave that there for us. that they know that there's some people that need to not have an orange dot, but you have to kind of know where the secret door is to close it. So take a look online. You should be able to find the script that you need to run inside of your terminal to disable the orange dot. Next question.
Robin Cutshaw from Atlanta, Georgia asked, is there a Mac software for mixing sources like Dante? General thoughts on mixing on a Mac when your sources are network-based or connected to the Mac.
Go ahead, Jason.
Dante Virtual Sound Card will do this when mixed with an application like Sounddesk. Sounddesk is from a pretty great app developer called LoudLab, and it will allow you to basically just do software mixing. I wouldn't use it for production, but in a pinch, it will work.
Yeah, another one to look at is Harrison's Mixbus. It is designed to work, kind of from a network perspective, and they actually joined us for a second hour, maybe a year ago. We should probably have them back and see how they're doing. But but that's another one that is designed to work in the cloud and work with network computers. And remember that you can. Well, I don't know if I would. We know some people that just mix this all in Pro Tools or Logic, just passing it through live. It's not going to give you quite the same tool sets that you'd be normally having in a live environment, but it's definitely used that way as well. So your DAW can actually usually pass that through. Again, you're not using it the way it's designed, but it does work. But the one that I'm going to be experimenting with over the next couple of weeks is going to be the Mixbus, and seeing if that can solve some software-only solutions for me for mixing. Next question.
From Jeff Cohen's in Miami Beach, Florida, and here on the panel, thoughts or experience with the Anker B600 video bar?
Go ahead, Courtney.
No experience with it. I looked at it, but here's my thoughts on it. This is kind of what you're talking about, which it looks like it's a combination webcam and flip over light, and it has 2 microphones built in and supposedly does noise cancellation. I find these webcams with mics built in to be always less than preferable for most video conferencing work. You're better off to get a microphone closer to your mouth than to get one of these that is logic steered and has noise canceling, especially if it tries to do noise canceling from distant microphones that are not close to the speaker. So if you're 2 or 3 feet away from this thing, I don't think the noise canceling is going to work very well.
Go ahead, Jeff. Bill. Sorry.
Yeah, I believe from a physics standpoint that Courtney's absolutely right about that. I will say that Anker is a pretty astonishing company. I mean, they came out of those little power bricks and things like that early, and they must have been a substantial success because they've spread out into so many areas that I was surprised them spreading out into, almost all of them video production related. And while their stuff isn't of the highest quality for a low to mid tier industrial design company that's working in the technology space here, they're putting out a lot of stuff that saves you a lot of money. And so if you're just starting out and this is the best you can do, I wouldn't be surprised if it did a decent job. It's kind of like, to me, the Costco thought, about 70% of the quality for about 40% of the price is what I generally expect. Maybe, but you'd have to test it to make sure it holds up to your standards.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, and I just stumbled on this today. Actually, just stumbled across it. It's and I think we also have to temper our view on some of these things. This, obviously a product like this is not intended to replace a full camera array, a full grid of lighting and a microphone and a preamp and all that stuff. This stuff is this better than, someone's built-in webcam. And even, Alex, I know you guys send out kits, so always looking to streamline that. So this looks neat to me. I haven't, of course, tried it, but it's got a light bar, attached to it, presumably. Maybe that's even software controllable. It's actually has speakers also. So yeah, it looks impressive for, one device that someone just needs to plug into their computer.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't put those in kids. The main thing for us is that a light right coming from the camera's point of view is usually not not the most flattering, and so it's going to be sourcey. It's going to be coming straight at the person. I'm not sure if that's where I'd want to put a light. It's usually not where we coach people to put lights. So we usually want them off to one direction or another. Mics, as Courtney said, almost never work from the webcam. or work very well. I'd rather send them a $15 Pulson mic, a headset mic, than have them use something that's going to increase the amount of distance from them. The big problem is when you send it out to a civilian, their rooms are usually not very well treated, and so as you get further away from that mic, it falls apart really fast. And conference rooms are even worse, which is what it's designed for. What this one is evidently designed for. So I think that it would be difficult for us to use that on an all-in-one, as both Bill and Courtney outlined. An all-in-one camera is probably not something we would suggest here. I can see the market that they're aiming for, and that market is one that may not, once they get it, I think that it'd be harder they may not know that other things are available, but I think that's the market they're gaining right now. I will say that the webcam that I'm the happiest with are these little guys here. This is a little bit more expensive, but these Insta360 links, I bought a third one. It's coming sometime later this week. So I have a 3-camera capability with these guys, and they are by far the best webcams that I've used. Next question.
From Matthias Utilia from Helsinki, Finland, network bonding and video encoder, for example, live view or in router. What differences and benefits do you see those two options, and what do you use?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to play a Mickey here and say it depends. There are a lot of different ways, active backup, XOR broadcast, adaptive transmit load balancing, adaptive load balancing, and it's really going to depend upon what your switch will support. For example, versions 1.5, they are standardized, and 1.5 and 6 don't require any change on the switch. But your standard static aggregation does. So, I don't know. It's useful, but I don't know. Use sparingly.
So the issue if you're talking about between a live view and a router, so like a PepWave or something like that, or a PepLink, the main thing is that number one is the live view manages your subscription to, if you're using a solo, it doesn't, but if you're using one of the larger live views, it's going to manage the subscription to all your cell providers. And they also in the cloud manage that connection. And you just turn it on and it just works. Now you have to pay per hour over a certain amount or per minute over a certain amount, but it just works. Like you just turn it on and it just does the thing. So that's usually a much more stable way. I used to lease 2 live views, and I had a lot of PepWaves at the same time. So we used a lot of these. For bonded cellular, the router works fine. We put up to 5 modems in there, but now you're managing it. And the problem is that live view goes in and builds those relationships with the cell providers and makes sure that they're not being managed by the cell providers. And when you do it yourself, it's a lot of work. So to get that working, otherwise what will happen is you'll have 5 of these cell phone, you'll have 5 modems, and half of them are getting clamped down for some reason because you're not using them the way that the cell provider had leased them to you to use. And so anyway, so you end up with a lot of trouble with them. We do like bonded routers for general use, but for video streaming, we tend to stick with the live views, the DeGeros, those types of tools, because they have that managed network that just tends to be a lot more stable. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, could Ventura's Stage Manager feature make working on a 14-inch MacBook Pro easier because of the ease of switching between applications?
I'll go ahead, Javier.
My first answer would be I don't think so. It is one of the features in Ventura that I'm still getting used to it. It changes basically how you lay out everything in the screen, but I found it more usable on bigger screens, like maybe a big monitor when you're connected to your iPad that you can change things, and maybe even in the MacBook Pro connected to an external monitor where you can have different this full sets of apps running together. But for smaller computers, at least in my opinion, it's easier to have full screen apps and just doing the four finger swipe and changing from one to another, rather than having a lot of really small apps in the 14-inch screen.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I agree with Javier. This is candy that I don't see a need for yet, but maybe I'll get used to it. We've already got four-finger swipe. We've already got mission control. We've already got command tab. How many more ways do we need to switch from one app to another?
Good, Jason.
If you're already good at managing with keystrokes, this will add nothing. However, if you watch a civilian, it will be tremendously valuable for people that aren't you. We'll put it that way.
Good, Bill.
Well, I think all of that's true. I also think, though, that Apple is looking at the amount of power they have in these M1s and M2s and the rest of the way they're going. And they're realizing that if you have a single app open on your screen and you're using it, you're not really taxing that very much unless it's a really unusual app. So the idea that they're going to build an environment where people who find this comfortable can load up 4 or 8 or however many apps they want, run them concurrently because they have enough memory, that now the system has enough throughput to be able to manage all that input successfully. I think it's they have a tool that they can do this on, so they decided to explore it, and it will be useful for some people who like working this way. Not everybody, and I'm kind of in the camp that everybody else was. I don't see, with all the screens and windows I'm managing already, why I would want more complexity, but I could easily be proved wrong about that.
Next question.
Next question in from Colin Makahi in Dublin, Ireland. I was about to order a couple of Sonnet Duo Moto X Mac Mini Echo 3 rack mount systems for multiple DeckLink Quad 2 cards. Anyone else using them? Should I be looking at Echo 1s? And is there an issue with Echo 3 and power distribution, etc.?
I think it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. So, theoretically, you will be able to get 16 outputs from Zoom, with those 2 cards, but you may also decide that you want some going in, some going out. So that's the great thing about the quad card. So it'd be great to have multiple cards there. So I don't think that there's a power distribution problem. I think that it's mostly just most of us just don't have the money to get the Echo 3 rack mountables, which look great. But I think, and also, you're putting a lot of eggs into one basket there. But I think that that's where a lot of us are going to end up going with some of our build outs. But I think that also because we may be using those Mac Minis as inputs and outputs. So we may have 12 inputs defined and 4 outputs or something like that. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, all I would add to that is that OWC, if you're looking for a less expensive and more modular way to do this, has an excellent card mount that I want to say it was maybe $250, and it works wonderfully.
Yeah, and the rack mount is really interesting, and that's where I think we're going to end up going with office hours eventually. We're probably just going to get the 1 rack mount as opposed to the 3, but having systems that have their own cards with a single output, mostly because I think that I'm being very conservative, that what we know is that the 8 outputs on an SDI will be 40% capacity, or 40 to 45% capacity of the computer. And so at that rate, we just know we have a lot of headroom, that it'll be stable. We can definitely put more into it, but I think that we would prefer generally to leave our computers with a lot of headroom, especially when it's not super expensive to do so. Next question.
From Matthias Utilia from Helsinki, Finland. Usually platforms transcode live streams to 30 frames per second. What would be the best way to approach when shooting in Europe, either 25 or 50 frames per second? How do pros deal with that?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, the thing about shooting at 50 and having a transcode is you want your frame rate of your camera to be divisible by the frequency rate of the current that is supplied via AC current. So in Europe, it'd be 50 hertz, so your camera would be at 25. This was more important back in the days when there was a lot of fluorescent lighting that was tied to the electrical frequency. And in most video cameras, especially webcams, have a choice in the software usually to select either 50 or 60 hertz for your sampling rate. So select a sample rate that matches the frequency rate of the country that you're in, and then let the software handle the transcoding up to 30 frames. So the point is you want to get rid of the flicker that may be caused if you have lights that are tied to the base frequency of the AC power. These days, most of them aren't, because LED lights have high frequency power supply, switching power supplies, and only the old fluorescents that are just on a straight transformer would create a problem with the sample rate, other than, if you were sampling at 60 or 30 in a 50 hertz country, that might cause some breathing in the exposure. So look for that. Make sure you're set to 50 hertz or 25 if your camera shutter is going for 25 frames per second.
Yeah, in the past, what we've done is we've definitely shot at 30 frames per second, because that's what YouTube or Facebook have been, so no matter where we are in the world, we just use the same frame rate. The time you get into the issue that Courtney's is if you're dealing with a lot of consumer lights, are where you're going to really see that problem. One thing you can do to avoid that is to lower the shutter speed. So you can be sampling at 60 frames a second or 30 frames a second, but you can lower your shutter speed to go underneath that. And one of the things that you want to look at is if you're going to stream at 30 and you're capturing at 60 or 50, remember that your motion blur isn't going to be correct, because you're throwing away every other frame, or roughly every other frame if it's 50. And so one thing that you may want to look at is lowering that shutter speed to a 360-degree shutter or a 270-degree shutter, depending on what you want to do to add a little bit more motion blur back in. You'll have less flickering. So those are ways to kind of manage that. But you can change that shutter speed. And in some cameras, like Sony's, they have some correction tools that allow you to really have fine tuning over the shutter to get to make that actually work. So you can still stay within the sample rate, the frame rate that you're looking for, but playing with the shutter will allow you to get sometimes below those consumer cameras. Most professional lighting in cameras will not do that, because they're cycling much higher, like a Kino, or definitely some professional level LEDs will cycle at a much higher rate than what is going on from the electricity coming in. So those are other things to think about there. So most of the time when we do it, we're controlling all the light, so we have a little less to worry about. Now, next question.
Vic Sinise in Lowell, Indiana. I like the new email reminder. Is this built on the Zoom webinar email? And if so, how do you do this?
It's no longer built on so when it was all text, it was definitely built on the webinar. And so what we did is every day, or we post something, there's a place in the webinar for email updates, and it says, you can update every, the hour before the event. And since we had a webinar every day at 5:55 for a 7 a.m., so 65 minutes before to the second. In fact, I found through experimentation, not purposeful experimentation, but just because I was behind, is that if you send it out right at 6:55, half the people will get the old one and half the people will get the new one. It creates mass confusion. That happened early on. So you really pencils down. After that, we actually moved to, we're using, it's one of those chimp app, MailChimp. There's SurveyMonkey and MailChimp, and there's a whole bunch of, I don't know why, I guess they've decided that monkeys are good at sending out emails. And so MailChimp is what we use now, and we've started to make adjustments. So Josh has been working hard on making it a little bit more readable, building sections out, and I think he's doing a great job. So we're still playing with what does it look like on dark mode versus light mode. Eventually, we want it to be a little bit more image based, but we're going to move slowly down that path. So it's we're moving along, but I think that Josh and the team have been doing a great job at making it more readable. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, maybe it's just a factor of the changeover that's happening, but I used to receive 2 notification emails. Now I'm getting 4. So maybe that's just in transition between the two.
Well, it's
I
probably
can't
because-
ignore them now.
Yeah, exactly. They just come in little groups, little packs of. You can always remember that you can always look at the email that you're getting, and if you're getting 4 of them, it usually means that you've interacted with us a couple different times, and the merge didn't work correctly, and it's probably 4 different emails that you have there. So if you go in there and unsubscribe to the ones that. If you're getting more than you want, just go ahead and unsubscribe to the ones. I like them as I get 4 too, because I have 4 different emails that I've subscribed to. But I like it because it's easy for me to find. There's a big section of updates, and it's when I'm scanning really fast, it's easier to get to. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, they've done a great job with it because it's not ending up in my spam folder anymore. It's clearly laid out. You can get to the things like joining and hitting certain meetings very easily. I think they've done a great job on it, so I just wanted to compliment it. Talked a little bit with Josh and Eric last night on After Hours, and they gave me a little peek on what was going behind the scenes. But nice work.
Yeah, Josh and Eric both have been doing a great job at just kind of helping get, and Eric's been working on a lot of it. Both Josh and Eric have been working on a lot of infrastructure in the back end to make this a lot better, so kudos to them. Next question.
Yes, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anything here. It's Srikanth Siram from Chennai, India, asking the question, how to play back AVI video codec and formats which are embedded in PowerPoint Keynote on a Mac. AVI plays on dedicated software players, but not on any presentation software, and converting to MP4 is not an option since we deal with very big file sizes.
Go ahead, Bill.
I remember when I had to learn that sometimes you're talking about a codec and sometimes you're talking about a wrapper for a codec. I think this is one of those cases. AVI is really a wrapper. It's not a codec, which means that inside that AVI can be embedded 25 different kinds of video files, some of which your computer may be able to parse and some not. So really you have to get down to the codec level if people are having trouble understanding or parsing those files and playing them back, and figure out what is it that their machine doesn't have an interpreter to play versus what you're encoding your actual video to. So just understand that difference, and I'll let Jason do the rest of it.
There you go, Jason.
Boy, Srikanth, you're really tying my hands here. In order for this to work, the application, in this case, Keynote or PowerPoint, needs to understand what it's playing. And if you can't transcode it, I would say your best bet would be something like adding a web page to the slide with possibly Plex or VLC and trying to play it remotely over the network. And it's not going to be pretty, but it might work.
Yeah, I mean, MP4s are not larger automatically. They are larger in the default setting that you probably have with whatever you're using to encode. So oftentimes you may not be able to get down to the exact sizes of the AVI, but you can probably get pretty close. The ways to get the AVI converted, and you can, there's a variety of tools, everything from Handbrake, FFmpeg if you want to get a little geeky about it. As well as I think VLC will export some stuff, but it's kind of rough. Of course, there's media encoder or a compressor, but compressor won't read the AVIs. You'll need to convert it to an intermediate before you get there. To get better or more efficient compression in the MP4s, the first thing to do is increase the number of frames between keyframes. And so typically that's going to be set at 30 or 60, but you can set that up to 200, 300 frames. And so now what that'll mean is that if minor changes, if it's just panning slowly, might have some ghosting that goes on, but that's going to make it much more efficient to make that work. The second thing you can do, of course, is lower the compression quality. And that's, and of course, AVI has already crushed it. so it is already probably pretty low quality as it is. So you can probably get a more aggressive, but you'll find that you can get, they may not be 1-to-1 with an AVI, but you could get it within you get it to an MP4 that's probably 1.5 the size of the AVI if you push it hard enough. And it probably won't look that much different. Yep, next question.
Colin Makahi from Dublin, Ireland asked, the new Insta360 Link webcam, anyone tried to remote controls, pan, tilt, zoom yet? Effective?
Yeah, we did that test early on, and we found it to be, you can definitely pan, tilt, zoom with it. You don't have all the other tools that are available to it. So what makes it special is really the software that's there. And you don't have access to much of that, but you can pan, tilt, zoom the link. Next question.
Tom Ferguson, Phoenix, Arizona asked, what are you using for a test oscilloscope? Has anyone tried an iPad appliance or your favorite standalone scope?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, just looking for something simple for the bench. Tektronix was always the standard. I assume it still is. But then there's O1 Technology. They've got a little gadget that goes into an iPad. Don't know if I want to mess with that or not.
Go ahead, John.
I haven't seen any of the ones that plug into iPad that refresh rate. I've got an old Tektronix 100 meg dual scope sitting in my garage, Tom. Maybe you can come over and dust it off.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the Tektronix was top of my list in the day, but I just recently, when the question came up to see what alternatives are out there, and Leader seems to have quite a bit of product out there, expect to spend about $7,000.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I don't know. The last hardware scope I had was probably 10, 15 years ago, and I used to have Leader scopes, and they sat in a rack in front of me. And when they nailed it, and I'm saying that because it turned out that over time I got more and more confidence in the results that scopes were coming out. Now that they're built into things like NLEs, I tend to use those because I'm not doing external equipment that I want to look through. I'm usually doing a signal that's on my desktop already. But I've just come to trust the scopes that are built in most modern software, so I'm not going to be buying hardware anytime again. I remember the garage selling that off for about $150, and I think it cost me $4,000 or $5,000.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I have a Hitachi old analog scope that's on my bench for doing old school stuff and high frequency stuff. You know what I've gotten used to is these little teeny handheld scopes. This one's both an oscilloscope and a digital tester, so it tests components with that zero insertion slot over here where you can put transistors, capacitors, anything else, and it will test it and give you lots of information about it. It'll tell you what type of device it is and all the information about that transistor, whether it's an FET, PNP, NPN, what the forward and all the voltages are. And the current loss. So that's handy to have. It's only about $60. You can throw it in your kit and it'll be portable. And the scope is only 200 kilohertz, so it's no good for video. But it's great for audio or for pulse width modulation or anything, diagnosing any kind of digital signals that are not super high frequency.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I held this question till Courtney was around. I figure being the maven of little gadgets, he'd come up with something.
Yeah, and I think the last one that I bought, and really what you start paying for is the frequency. So as you move the frequency up, I think the last one that I purchased over the summer for a project was 150 megahertz, and that's a Handtech DSO2 D15, and it is more of a desktop unit, and it is about $260, and it's pretty impressed. I have to admit, that was kind of like, I can't believe this little box does the thing. So anyway, but I think Courtney's suggestion of having something that you can have in your bag is super powerful, of just being able to know what's going on or what's what, and be able to see it quickly. So those are some options. But there are a ton on Amazon, and what you're really looking, well, at least what I'm looking for, is frequency. Like how high frequency. When you start getting into the 300 megahertz, now you're talking about, those are the $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 units. So it just depends on what you need. Next question.
Next question from Jeff Cohen, Miami Beach, Florida, and here on the panel, lightning tips for avoiding shine on us smooth-headed folks, especially in a closed space.
I go, Jason.
And it's lighting, by the way. I don't want lightning on me. Just lighting, please.
Yes. Tip number one, do not get struck by lightning. I misread this, so I think Bill will get most of it. Mm-hmm. I had oil control strips thinking like, oh, okay, that's what he's going for. But big source, big diffusion, and I'll let Bill fill in the rest.
Yeah, and if you're using a big source with big diffusion, you're going to have a little bit of challenge. It's not that bad. I think the key here is a flag. That's the way I've
typically handled people who have a shiny head up there, and you're trying to light them from the front, but something is really reflecting off of and giving you a hot spot on their face. I would take a relatively large flag, I'd put it on a C-stand with an arm, and I'd lower it until I got enough. And the key to this is with a large light source, the farther that, or the closer that flag is to the light source, the less of a sharp edge you're going to get between the transfer zone, the light to shadow area. So I would push the flag out toward my talent until I got the kind of transfer zone that I wanted, and see if I could get that somewhere around their upper forehead, so it would cut significantly down the light on the top of their head and the top of their forehead, and still allow their face to be lit properly by that softbox.
Obviously, I know what a flag is, but for everyone else that doesn't know what a flag is, maybe you could just tell them.
Sure. A flag is a piece of dark, opaque fabric wrapped around a kind of a shape. Typically, they're three-sided shapes in video lighting, and they have a piece of fabric, and so you put that on a C-stand, put it up high, and you bring it down so that it chops the light. With a focusable instrument, you can get a really defined line, and you can actually literally take light off of something like behind me. There's that vertical thing. If I wanted to flag the light just off of that vertical post, with a small instrument, I could actually do that. When you get to soft boxes, it's throwing out so much light from so many angles, you can't get that sharp delineation between lit and unlit. So that's what a flag is, just a big piece of fabric on a mounting scrim that you can put in a C-stand and a grip head and an arm and get over your talent.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Sorry, I was playing with this demonstration piece. Another thing you could do is use a piece of polarizing filter. It's hard for me to get it close. But as you see, as I turn it, it changes. Or the other thing, you could wear a hat. Because if you have a lot of reflection on your head as you rotate the of course, it brings out all of the blemishes in your skin as you rotate it. So polarizing gel put in front of let my camera readjust to the loss of that half stop for the polarizing filter. That can eliminate a lot of reflection off a shiny head. And the other solution, like I say, wear a hat and put a little light down low so it lights up underneath the hat.
All right, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, another lighting tip here is if you see the shine on my forehead, if you just utter the words Shazam, it'll go away.
Yeah. So there's I'll show you right now. You can see a little bit of shine on my forehead, and I have this magic thing that I do here. It goes away pretty quickly if I just.
It's worth mentioning, though, you better wash that stuff off or you're going to break out like crazy.
Yeah, no, I've been using it for a while. I don't use it every day because I'm worried about exactly what Jason's talking about. We use this. This is called Mattify, and it's available by Mac. It's really hard to find right now for some reason, probably because it gives people cancer or something like that. So anyway, I have no idea. I don't know. I'm just saying that maybe they figured that out, but it's very hard to find out.
Sell the stock.
That's how Office Hours was sued out of existence.
Yeah.
Nice recommendation.
So risk reward.
Yikes.
Oil absorbing. What I normally use is oil absorbing, and I didn't get them on this morning, which is why I was shiny, which is why I could do that demo. All right, next question.
Next question in from Mike Muddy Schlegel in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm shopping for a set of basic walkie-talkies for an upcoming client event. We only need a set of 4 or 6 walkies to communicate with the conference center. We'll want headsets for privacy. Any recommendations or things to look for or avoid?
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, as a matter of fact, depending on how far you want to go within the conference center, something as simple as an MURS, that's multiple use radio service, walkie-talkie, can be found from Amazon for $50. These are 5-frequency, high-band, 151 megahertz channels. They can be used with subaudible tone and digital coded squelch. They come with a drop-in charger that's USB compatible, and it's not a bad deal. Also, they have the little clothing microphone and the earpiece with the air tube for it. So it can solve a problem with a throwaway kind of radio. They're good for going through 3 levels of brick wall, for example, and otherwise about line of sight, half mile through airspace. So depending on how much you want to spend, $25 a piece.
I go, Bill, real quick.
There's been a lot of action in that space, but if you want something serious, you can also rent Motorola's. We do it for events all the time. The big Motorola's that really have penetration and will go 1.5 miles, and you can rent 6 of them for probably $50 for the whole thing.
Yeah, as Bill mentions, for one event, rent them. Like if you're going to use them over and over again, you can buy something, and I would still buy the Motorola's if I could. They're really, really powerful and reliable and kind of the standard. But usually you can find them to rent almost anywhere. Get a set of 6 of those, and as Bill said, they're probably going to be less than $100 to rent them for the event, and that's going to give you more stable output. Midland is what we've used in the past, where we just throw things into a bag. So a lot of Midlands will just have throw 6 of them in, and we use them while we're getting set up. Before the comms come up, we have the walkies just so we don't have to run across the room, but we're usually not expecting them to go much past the room. We have some Baofengs that will go miles. I'm not sure if they're legal, but we've had them go for 2 or 3 miles. And usually we've had those around for emergency situations, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend them. Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota asks, can you just use an adapter to get a standard USB mic into the iPhone 14? Is there an alternative for a better headset or XLR mic?
Go ahead, Jeff.
2 separate questions. The first one, the short answer is yes. It really depends. You start off with this little guy. I would start using the Apple branded official, I forget what they call it now, if it's the camera connector, but it's a Lightning on this end. It's a standard USB, and then Lightning, and this is important because you put power into this. So this goes to your charging brick or power source. You plug whatever USB device, and it's amazing, by the way, what you can actually plug into an iPhone, keyboard, mouse, everything. So you plug it in there. You will almost certainly need at least power from here, and that still may not be sufficient. If the other trick, by the way, is some things won't work with the official Apple one. So also order a bunch of these from wherever, Amazon, anywhere else, the knockoffs. And I've actually had sometimes where something will work with the knockoff, not work with the Apple one. And then finally, the last trick is go into a USB hub. So this goes to the USB hub, a powered USB hub, and then whatever you want to plug into the iPhone, iPad plugs into the hub. And I'll let other folks make some great recommendations for mics.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'll take the second part. Jeff is correct on the first part of the question. The second part, there's a lot of devices out there that'll convert everything from XLR to 3.5 to USB. I believe Rode makes one. It's almost the size of an XLR connector. And there's a X something that somebody makes that you can plug actually 2 microphones into it, and it'll go right into your I'll post what that is, but it's an X mic or X something like that.
Yeah, in the past we've used Ceramonic for this, both into headphones as well as Lightning, and they've worked pretty well as far as getting that in. If price is not a consideration, the way I usually hook it up in the office is with a Lightning to USB, and then that USB goes to a USB Pre 2 from Sound Devices, which works exceptionally well. Next question.
From Sam Greenwood in Toronto, Canada, is there a way to use a basic Wacom Intuos tablet for telestration?
Yeah, I'm not using the Intuos. I'm actually using the one, the Wacom one, and so that's what you're seeing here. And that's tied into a Mac Mini, which I've described in the past. You can probably go back and look. But so you can absolutely use a Wacom to do it. It won't do it by itself. You'll still need a computer. I'm using an old 2012 Mac Mini that I had laying around to do that telestration because it doesn't require a lot of power. Last question for the first hour.
And that's from Colin Mulcahy in Dublin, Ireland, working with Blackmagic Design HyperDeck Studio 12Gs. I'm trying to set external timecode to use Tentacle Sync with reference in, but it skips external in the HyperDeck menu, can't select it.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a goofy thing. The reference jack on the back of that is for TriSync and Blackburst, not for timecode. You need to go in for the tentacle, either into one of the SDI inputs, or I believe that there's an XLR that will pass timecode directly through.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it might. The Tentacle probably is a mic level output because it's designed for going into DSLR cameras. So it may not be 1 volt peak to peak, which is what your LTC needs to be to go into anything that has an LTC input on it. And I'm not sure that reference input on the Blackmagic will accept LTC, or like Jason said, it's just designed for tri-level sync, or another SDI signal that has time code built into it.
All right. We are now jumping subjects to our second hour, and we're a little bit more introspective this week. We're doing a bunch of work on the back end, a bunch of development, so we didn't want to bring in external folks. So it gives us a little time to talk about ourselves, get the most out of it. So you'll see things are being a little bit more introspective this week as we kind of work through some of the bits and pieces of what we're working on here. But we thought that it would be a good opportunity. I think a lot of times people, come into office hours and don't really fully understand how it all works and what we're actually doing here. So we thought that it might be good to stop every once in a while and talk through those things. If panelists want to raise their hand here, they can in the panel discussion here before we start going into the questions. So if you have questions on how to get the most out of office hours, or how to, or what a lot of these things are designed for, then go ahead and ask those questions here. This is good. It's good. Or it'll be really short. We'll find out everybody knows everything, and no one needs any information about how office hours works. But to give you some sense of some of the design before we go into the questions, a lot of times, what I found, in many things that I worked on over the last 30, 40 years, was that I just needed somebody around to answer questions. Like I'm working on something and I just need somebody available to answer the question. I don't need to take a class. I don't need to take a course or anything else. I just need to have that information at roughly when I needed it. And so a lot of what we do here is trying to provide that, whether it's after hours where you can jump in and ask a question, or office hours where we have more structured question and answer. The idea is really to, people are working on stuff, and we want to make sure that while they're working on it, we have at least somebody with some experience, or some group of people with some experience, that are able to hopefully give them some useful input. From there, the other thing that I found was just working on things makes a big difference. And so providing opportunities for people to work on different aspects of what we're doing is really important, because it's the best way to learn, in my opinion. The best way to learn is to be doing it and asking questions. And so that's going to give you real practical knowledge of how to actually get things done. It also has a couple other benefits. One is that when you're working with other people, you're getting to know them. They're getting to know you. You're finding people that you want to work with. You're finding people that you want to build projects with. And that's something that it's really hard to do on the internet a lot of times when we're just looking at forums. What people say and what they do are different things. So it's useful to have something to work on, projects to work on, so that you can see how people hold themselves in that area. It's also designed to help people kind of build up their connections with a lot of other people. Whether it's in Discord, working on the teams, but then also things like the panel and the panel allows people who are ready to provide some use back to the community. A lot of people see them. I see them. Other people see them in starting to kind of build some level of notoriety, hopefully positive notoriety, from being a positive impact on the group. And so I think that all those things traditionally are hard to get, in my opinion, in many, many aspects. And so, we're trying to add those things as opportunities for everyone in a way that, most of us have had to work through that. And I admit that most of the things that I've done in the past I've gotten because I was in some kind of community, so the kind of work that I got, whether it's my job at Lucasfilm was because I was on an AOL forum, giving answering questions. And when I say answering the questions, that just to kind of go back into this, I was in an AOL forum for Electric Image, and it was a bunch of broadcast people, and I barely knew how to use Electric Image, but someone would ask a question, and then I would work all night on it and just try to figure it out. And I figured, well, if they're working for ABC or HBO or some film company and they have this question, then I should know how to do it. And so I would just sit there and work through it. And this is before we really had a lot of internet to work with. And so I would just answer those questions, but I'd always come up. I wouldn't say, "Oh, I worked on this all night." I'd go, "Oh, you might want to try this." I just said, like, try it, and it would look like I just kind of flippantly. The goal was not to, be inauthentic, but also not to make a big deal about the fact that I just spent, 8 or 10 hours working on your little quip, and so, but I learned very fast, how to do things, and I built up a lot of connections with a lot of people, and those connections ended up having me become a demo artist for Electric Image, and then an employee at Lucasfilm, and the line was very direct. And to that, and so I learned that was that was something that was useful. I did it because it was fun, and it was a great way for me to learn. But the other thing that happened is I started writing lots of articles, and I found that the easiest way to meet people, I know this is hard for people to believe, but I'm not the most social person. I'm not, I hang out with everybody here, but I'm not really known for going into big groups or even networking. If I walk into a party and there's a bunch of people and no one comes over to talk to me, I will be there for 5 minutes. I just don't have any tools to interact with people. So I found that the easiest way to manage that was to speak in public. I know that sounds like the most opposite thing, but what it did is it meant I didn't have to introduce myself to anybody ever. So I would speak and then I'd come off the stage and then people would want to talk to me about whatever I did. And then I didn't have to do that with the part that I'm not good at. A lot of how I've designed things, I admit, are partially because of my own, deficiencies in how I interact with things. But I do think that it's a particularly good way to do it, which is that you're providing use to the community that you're interested in, and that community then responds. If you're doing it out of use, if you're doing it out of showboating or showing off, and you can see that when you go to a conference where someone's just pushing their own product, pushing their own, brand, pushing their own things, usually just doesn't come across very well, but if you're really authentically trying to help people with ideas and you're kind of low key about it, I just found it to be the best way to meet other people, and build up relationships. And so a lot of this is based around things that I found to be, successful over a lot of years, and trying to, how do you build this so that other people have that opportunity, and how can I use the small amount of success that I've had and try to provide that, provide it as an on-ramp for a lot of other people. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
I apologize. My wife is working at the same time that I wanted, but I thought it was important for me to come on and share this with you. First, I want to say thank you to the office hours community for supporting me in my endeavors in the community. I want to say that tomorrow I will be celebrating 70 episodes of Conversation with Tony Mobley. I have had shows. I don't like to use the word shows, but I'll say shows for office hours' sake. I've had 70 shows. I have had views of only 50, and I've had views of over 4,000 views. I have had people who are educators, who are trying to make a difference. And in November, I will have a CEO of a company on Conversation with Tony Mobley. I've had musicians, I've had artists. I have had a lot of different individuals from all ranges of society on Conversation with Tony Mobley. But as interesting as that might seem, the most valuable thing for me is the work that I have been able to do through office hours with the House of Worship. I have been in a position where the things that I've learned from the office hours community, the support that I've gotten from the office hours community, has allowed me to pull a group of senior citizens who wanted to have worship into a space where they are comfortable sharing what they are doing in YouTube. And the interesting thing about it is that because this small community of worshipers has been able to grow their visual streaming atmosphere, it is pulling other small churches to want to do or emulate what they're doing. And so this idea that Alex Lindsay has about a global community where no one is left behind, I am seeing it in real time. And I want to say thank you to Alex. I want to say thank you to all of the individuals who have supported Conversation with Tony Mobley on the back end, who have shared the word. We're going to have a conversation about cancer in November, cancer survivors. There's so many different things that are going on. There's so many emotions that I'm feeling right now. And I could go on and on and on and on about this space where I'm in. And, you know, an old guy from Noonan, Georgia, being able to have a conversation with people all over the world with so much knowledge. And I am still in this space of learning and growing. I'm in the training for question manager. I want to be at some point at TD, and I want to continue to participate in Office Hours University. So I want to say thank you all so much and I know everything that has happened. Thank you is not enough, but that's all I have. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I have to say that you're more than welcome. And Tony is one of the professors in how to get the most out of office hours. Tony shows up and that he shows up on the he shows up. He's working on things. He comes in, asks questions. He goes into after hours, asks questions. He's working through these things and using up the resources that are available. And when Tony started, it's always amazing to see Tony here now, because when Tony started, it was like a laptop and there was a big, there was an open window behind him. We couldn't really see him at all. And now he's like super pro. and he's done all of that by just showing up, asking questions, and being him, and being authentic and looking for solving that and really trying to make a difference. And it's just been really a pleasure, Tony. Jeff?
Yeah, and I want to give some words of encouragement to folks that are thinking about participating or wondering how to participate and join in. As someone who has watched Office Hours, been a viewer since virtually the beginning, but only really recently started participating. And that was first by getting to the point where I can ask questions and get that answered by the panel, and then eventually joining the panel to help answer anything I can. And so the process, of course, may seem daunting, just even where to start. There may be some speed bumps along the way. So just reminding everyone that everyone you're interacting with along the way, they're all volunteers. So, it may not be as smooth as perhaps, eventually it'll work into, but just be persistent, ask questions, start on Discord, and take it from there. And, even if you just get to the point where you're one that is asking questions, that's a big help. And for those that don't know, they get voted on, and it's a great way to make sure that useful questions bubble up to the top and get answered by someone. And the last thing, just to add, in case it also maybe seems daunting to want to join the panel. I mean, obviously, there's lots of experts here. I mean, heck, Alex could probably just, answer all the questions by himself, and we could all go take a nap and just watch. But everyone has a different perspective. Even if you're on here and one question pops up that you have an answer that no one covered yet, that means you're probably ready and you can start just there. So I just encourage everyone to move forward if you'd like to participate and think you can add something to it. It helps you and it helps everyone else.
Yeah, and I will say that a lot of folks, I think that all of us are smarter than we are. We all look smart because somebody answers your question every single time, but it's because they're different groups of people that are answering it. And you want to see the variety of people on a panel. Now, I can answer many questions, but I don't answer them as well as many people here in their specific verticals. And so what really makes this rich is the fact that there are people with other backgrounds that are going to give you a deeper answer than something that I might be able to do. I try to field all the questions to make sure that people walk away with some answer. but it's definitely much richer when we have the content experts that we have here. It just makes a much better show, and it makes it a much deeper show when we have the panelists that we have. Go ahead, Bill.
So in the beginning, from the point of view of somebody who's watching the show, this may look like a show. I think for those of us who've been on the panel for a long time, we don't see it as much as a show. That is an aspect of it. But we see it as an interactive and growing test bed. And that's from our experience coming in when really it was just kind of a small bunch of people gathering in a parking lot, and people more came up, and then somebody said we want to explore some neighborhoods, so we started walking around as a group and talking about things and asking questions. Eventually we started upping our game because it was fun to up our game. So we wanted to see more neighborhoods, so we got roller skates, and we moved a little faster because of that. And then the next thing you know, people were starting to get bicycles and bring that in, and we were moving faster, covering more territory and going more global in a real sense that it was really fascinating. And every time we've iterated, we've had little problems along the way, but the magic of this group is that there's so much, not just technical, but I think just intellectual capital that Alex has managed to track to this, that there's always somebody to keep the wheels from coming off. There's always somebody to do the next show, and it always keeps iterating. But behind the scenes, that still is happening today. So you may think this is a cohesive show that we've all practiced, and to some degree we have our roles in it and things like that, but there's still so much development going on under the hood, and we come in and we get disrupted, even as panelists a little bit, like, oh, it was working that way last week, now it's working something else. And we have to keep that iterative, agile mindset to deal with what's changing about this. And I really think this thing, as we get past the level and we start to motorize our bicycles and maybe move into motorcycles and into eventually cars and who knows, limousines at some point in the distant future. Rockets, yeah. It's that spirit of let's just see if we can make this work every single day, and let me contribute what I can, and let me predominantly learn from all the people around me that I see solving problems in unique and exciting ways, and telling me about things I never could have imagined learning any other way.
Good, Mitchell.
Here's what you're going to find out, what's interesting about this. And Alex said something earlier which really resonated with me. And I don't want to make this a big testimony, but I do want to tell people what their benefit is to joining and, becoming involved. Believe it or not, I'm also one of those people that walks into a room, and if I don't know anybody, I don't engage them in conversation. I'm kind of quiet that way, believe it or not. Sometimes I'll wear my radio persona to my detriment in a room and try to interact with people that way. But here's what happened to me coming into office hours is that it's not just your ability to answer questions and speak like a broadcaster or to be less introverted. It's learning all those things. And here I am at the age of 68, a person that spent 40 years in broadcasting, that I'm learning things socially that I frankly did not have in my life, and now I do. So I'm learning how, walking into a room and moving in with a giant personality sometimes doesn't leave airspace for other people. My friends here on the panel helped me to be a better person. So that's an advantage that you never would have figured coming in here. We share a lot of conversations because of the restrictions on what we can talk about. We don't get into those typical roadblocks in politics and fissionable materials. So it forces us to be more sharing with our experiences. And we all share the interest in technology. So we're all geeks in a sense, and that's what keeps it all going. I have found that office hours has become an integral part of my social interaction, and I believe firmly that it's made me a better person. So I challenge you, if you've experimented with this, and maybe you say, well, maybe I'm not a good reader, or maybe I don't answer questions. It's not just about that. It's about the social aspects and having all of these wonderful friends around you that make it a better thing.
Go ahead, Ken.
One of the things I enjoy about this, as you mentioned, Alex, is that almost always you get an answer to the question. And it seems marvelous that happens. And it's not because everybody knows everything, but everybody knows something. and there's enough everybody's in here, the chances are good that you'll get a reasonable answer to a question that is rudimentary or highly technical. And many times I have posed questions that begin, talk to me like I'm 5. And the response is excellent that way. The cool thing about this is a place where you go to fail. And after hours is an especially good venue for that. We answer the what if questions so you can figure out how it works. You get 20 or 30 other people who are willing to help you figure this thing out, whatever this thing is, so you don't have to go fail at a venue where you hope you're going to get paid for it. Fail here, figure it out. We'll all learn, and that makes everybody better.
Go ahead, Jason.
As a panelist from day one, I can safely say that this is probably got me through COVID just single-handedly. This community truly allowed me to preserve my sanity. And for that, if for no other reason, I'm deeply grateful. But what you will find, I think, if you decide to involve yourself in any way in the office hours community, is that there is genius without ego, which is a very rare commodity, especially in professional circles. Getting the right answer is one thing, but enjoying the kind of the wide width of different answers has been something that's kept me, coming back again and again. And Tony, you're definitely my favorite success story. For the very beginnings, just wonderful.
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, from being in radio engineering in the 1960s all the way through IT networks here in the new millennium, I am still amazed at the diversity of knowledge this panel has, and it's just insane with the depth of questions that we can ask and get an answer every time. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, and it is one of those things, because we built it as a peer-to-peer system, which is basically that we're learning from each other, and it's not everyone learning from me or from any other specific person. It means that as we get better, as we grow, as new people join, it has the potential to get richer and richer and richer, as opposed to, and that you have to start with at the very beginning. It really has to. And I'm always looking for places that I can be less, and more in, I'm always trying to sink into the group, as we move through it, but continue to support it as needed. Let's go ahead and jump to the next question.
And next question coming in from James Babbitt in San Diego, California. Is Andy Carluccio scheduled on After Hours next Friday? Is the schedule posted in Discord or chat or sent via email?
And Andy is scheduled for this Friday, and so stay tuned for that. He'll be coming in and answering your questions. And it's one of the things that we're building up more and more in After Hours, is more discussions that are usually a little easier to do when we're not on YouTube, and having just kind of open discussions. And we'll probably see more and more of that. So you really want to watch that email, because the email that goes out every morning is really giving you not just what we're doing here in office hours, but what's happening across the network. So it's going to be more and more important as we add more and more features to that. I will say that having a developer from a large company that's doing something that's integral to what we do available to us on a regular basis is pretty special. And when you see those types of things, you want to figure out how you can be there for that conversation, even if you're not using it yet and you're just listening to the questions and you're not doing it. There's a lot of knowledge. That hour with Andy is usually pretty intense, as far as lots of Q&A and lots of information really fast. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, asked, there are many facets to office hours at this point. What mechanism, Discord, should we have for questions and answers to help people formulate both to be clear? I'm guilty of being verbose at times.
I don't know if we have any tools for it. I think that we do limit the number of words that people can use so that they don't get too verbose. And that's really designed around the process. A lot of it is just trying to figure out how to give people the information that they need to answer your question. So, there is you have a tendency to think about it from your perspective, but you have to say, okay, I have this problem. Here are some of the elements that are necessary to answer that question. And this is what I'm trying to solve. But I don't know if there's necessarily a tool for that, other than continuing to practice and to figure out what are the important pieces of that puzzle. Sometimes you want to describe things that, not you specifically, Chris, but other people want to describe things in a way that there are things that are important to them, but is that pertinent to, us answering the question? Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, because of the character limit in the questions and the fact that you can't really run from one question to the next question, is to break your question down if it covers several aspects into separate ones and ask them one at a time. And after the first one gets answered, if we don't answer it completely, enter a follow-up question that'll come up later and say it's a follow-up, and ask about this particular area that we didn't cover in our previous answer. So you can break it up, and if the answers that if we don't come up with an answer, we might want to ask it on a separate day, because as the panel changes, the knowledge base changes. So spread it out over a number of days, or spread it out across several questions and break it down. That's the best way.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm going to support all of that, but do be careful, because remember, people are voting on what we should deal with first on the panel, which means that you can add 3 questions on a topic and they can get widely diverged if people are more interested in one aspect of that. So you're not guaranteed that they're all going to be answered at the same time. That may or may not be important to you, and it's great to get the answers regardless, but just know that that's a feature of the system.
Yeah, and I think that we do. People ask me often about the 250. I think it's 250 word or character limit, and a lot of it is just when we read it. When we gave people more space, it wasn't always that way. When we gave them, I think we had it up to 500. People just weren't more effective at asking the question. In fact, the questions were actually harder for us to understand when people had more room. So you may think that that's the case, but you just have to rethink it a couple times to figure out how to say it in that area. But we found that really made for clear questions that we can answer. For longer questions, really think about after hours. Next question.
A question from Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA. Josh asked, we're working on a form to be released in the email soon for a new panelist. What information would be useful to ask of future panelists? For example, technical expertise, general availability, RFI items, etc.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think the idea that putting your technical, I think Alex refers to them as verticals, is a good way to kickstart you if you're new. Most of us are pretty clear on this panel right here what the areas of expertise are. But if you put that in there, then it's going to give us a chance to have a better understanding of what's going on. And another thing that I would recommend that would continue to enrich your experience with office hours is go to the Discord RFI and look at the things that are going on in daily shows. You're gonna find out, not at a ruthless review level, but things that happen that may help you to improve or to be ready for when things happen. Because if you have a list of things that are errors or omissions, it just tends to put you forewarned. Don't let that happen to you.
Go ahead, Ken.
It's going to show up.
Also, in terms of what is your level of expertise, but also what is your level of interest in a particular subject? What most intrigues you? What do you want to know most about? And a panelist might be pushed off to the second hour ideas section in Discord as well to determine what other people are interested in. And perhaps there's a match there of how you can contribute to some of those subjects.
Good. Tony?
Just be one of the things that happened yesterday on office hours, one of Jeff said, have a willingness to want to learn. And I want to say, have a willingness to be vulnerable and willing to risk.
Good. Courtney?
Yeah, I think you want to break it down, the questionnaire, break it down into categories like audio, video, networking, streaming, and then under each topic like that, your level of expertise, like amateur, professional, prosumer, amateur, consumer, prosumer, and professional, so that you can quantify the level of experience in each particular area. So, you may be stronger in audio or video than other areas. And so by attaching a multiple choice of level of expertise to that, it'd be easy to quantify into the database.
Yeah, and the most important thing when you look at those is that you just have the willingness to jump on and share what you know. You probably want to come on with some knowledge. Remember that you don't have to answer on the panel. You don't have to answer any questions. We're not randomly throwing them to you. There will not be a test. And we've definitely had people who have come on and not answered anything for a couple shows. And that is totally fine for you to just come on, feel what it feels like to be in the panel, and to be part of that conversation and answer maybe a question that you're ready to answer. It's great when you have some vertical that you happen to know, but you definitely don't have to have a wide range or even necessarily a deep one to start with. Remember that in addition to being able to serve the community as a panelist, the other thing that you kind of bring to the game that you're learning is how to set up your kit, how to speak more effectively, how to be part of an online conversation. These are all things that you can train yourself in while you're doing this process as well. Next question.
Next one in from Bob Sturdivant in San Antonio, Texas. Bob says, is there a recommended reading list or website to study up the lingo before stepping into volunteer?
Go ahead, Jason.
I would start by saying, please don't hesitate to volunteer. The volunteer setup is designed so that you don't need to know a ton about the lingo. That said, I can share with you 2 books that I found really handy. The Backstage Handbook by Paul Carter, the 3rd edition is the one that I have, is just a wonderful illustrated piece of kit that taught me so much about rigging. I believe it's standard assigned reading for theater majors, but it's really handy for all kinds of AV production. And then the other one is the McGraw-Hill Pocket Reference Audio Video Cables Installer Pocket Guide. These 2 things should not be read cover to cover, but are an excellent, excellent resource.
Good, Mitchell.
Yeah, one of the things that are a gotcha are the acronyms. We've got lots of them. There's no specific place that they live. I think I was talking to Lois last week, and she was thinking maybe she could help generate a list that people could look at, understand a little bit more. But even not knowing an acronym is okay. You can just refer to it by letter and not necessarily know that PTZ is pan, tilt, zoom. It's okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
And I would argue the thing that is worse than acronyms are numbers and common names. For example, compressor, the app compressor that Alex mentioned and had mentioned before. But good luck going to Google and just typing in compressor and finding the one that he's talking about. And we're all guilty of this. Oh yeah, my 416. Some folks know what that is, but 416 alone is not necessarily good enough. So we're all guilty of this. I'm more throwing this back as maybe food for thought for all of us. There's a line where, of course, we don't want to constantly be saying, brand, make, model this, but we all often throw out, Mitch's 503 doesn't work. The mute button, I don't know. I still don't know what that is. So maybe something for us to think about of where that good line is of giving people enough to be able to look up or find maybe what we're talking about, but not having to explain every little detail of every product we talk about.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, I'm also going to say that the ability to make mistakes and recover from it. I mean, I made one earlier and Jeff helped me out because I had used the term flag and it didn't strike me that is not common outside of the business. And he had to challenge me on it, which was the appropriate thing to do because then I got to help the people who don't work in lighting and didn't know naturally what a flag is. You are going to make mistakes. You are going to say things. You're going to go home and you're going to go, why did I do that? It's just part of the process of getting to be confident enough on the panel that you can recover from mistakes, come back and do it again because you might miss one thing.
I don't think this is a question even for it's just a volunteer, not even a panelist. So, as you're working through that. And, the thing to remember with all of this is that the best thing to do is just keep asking questions. So during our event, there's an event chat that you can just ask the question. I don't understand what a flag is. And it shows up in event chat. Someone's going to answer it. You can ask that question in Discord. You can ask that question to the panel. If we take all the people watching every day and everybody asked one question a week, we'd have 30 questions when we start each one. So, just asking those questions, it seems like you may be the only one. One of the reasons that I built a question system, this is Makana's the 4th iteration of this, is because I realized early on that everyone thinks that their questions are unique, but generally many of their questions are shared by a lot of people. It's very rare for someone to have a truly unique question. Usually it's something that everybody can learn from. And so by letting people vote on it and say, yeah, me too, like I'm interested in that as well, then that gives us an opportunity to answer those questions for everyone. And so, you're more than welcome to go read and do searches, but my number one recommendation is to get into Discord, ask the questions in Discord, ask the questions in event chats, ask the questions in the show itself, and just get those out, because it's not, when you learn it, it's in your head or in your notes. When the group learns it, it's everywhere, and all of us can sit there and make sure that all of us keep on building our understanding of that, even if it's a simple question. There are many things that are relatively simple that people ask that I learned something from, that seems simple on the surface, but when someone says, "Oh, I use this tool," I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about little oscillators until Courtney." There was that question came up earlier months ago. Then Courtney recommended it, and then I went down the path, and then I ended up buying a couple of oscillators. I bought a little one, then I bought a bigger one, but I hadn't had one for a long time. But that's something that I just hadn't thought of for years. So, next question.
Next question in from Jesse Mills in San Francisco area. I'm often looking for production crew and also offer my own experience and skills to the community. I'd love to see something like a core competencies area of office hours where people can list their skills and experience.
We're working on something like that. It's probably still a little ways out. Once you start doing that, what happens is people get pretty obsessed with measurement. And so if you start putting out measurements, you have to make sure that you have an infrastructure that's going to support them properly. It's one thing I found over time. So, so we're definitely going to work on where people can kind of put up what they work on. We also want to figure out ways to define that. But the number one way to get to know other people, know what they know what they're useful for, and also to provide your own connection to other people is to get involved with the various teams. That's how you're really going to know. People are really going to know you. You're really going to know them, is to be part of the events that we do, whether they're one-time events or they're ongoing events, as we work on that. A lot of what we're trying to do is prepare our membership for the future. There's jobs that we're preparing for right now that don't exist yet. But if you look at the global network that's building this show, that's the future. And it just, we're helping to define that future and move it forward. So, the easiest way to predict the future is to create it. Next question.
From Jeff Cohen in Miami Beach, Florida, right here on the panel. How are all YouTube chapter marks and time codes generated, automated, or manually?
That continues to evolve. I think it's a little bit of both. So I believe that the chapter markers are generated partially by Mokana. They export. They'll punch their way out, and then Jeffrey Powers then gets them into YouTube. But I think he has to do a little cleanup work on it as well. So it's not something that's fully automatic, and it's not something that's fully manual. So Jeffrey provides a lot of you see him here on the panel every once in a while, but on the back end, on the YouTube side, making edits, doing things, making changes. That's Jeffrey is a key piece of that puzzle, and then he provides a lot of use. Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. The best office hours experience was joining the IBC 2022 field team with almost no experience in live broadcasting from the floor. Turned out that I knew more than I thought, and I learned much more than I expected. Office hours makes you learn every time.
There's nothing like getting into a project, and this is one place where you could go, I don't really know a lot, but I want to be on the team and I want to contribute, and we're going to figure it out, together. And so we've had folks that have come in that have very little experience and maybe camera operating for the first time, and we're like, okay, here's the camera, and we're going to take a very experienced technical director, and she's just going to walk you through it until you get there. And so I think that we want to continue to have places where people can come in with little to no experience and just absorb the information. It's one of the best ways to learn. I mean, I find that the best drug for learning is adrenaline, and so getting you into projects, getting you working on them in real time, and just having you learn as fast as you can while you're nearly drowning is a great way for you to absorb information. So I recommend it. Next question.
I still get adrenaline rushes when I hear next question. This is from Brandon Buttrom in Indianapolis, Indiana. And on our back end, what, if any, technical or organizational roadblocks stand in the way of enabling closed captioning on the live YouTube stream?
Well, there's a couple different ways to do it. I mean, we just have to decide what kind of auto capturing, if we wanted to do it with AI. We have to figure out what tools we would use to make that work. I think it's a little it is doing it with humans would be very expensive and more than we can afford right now. Doing it with an auto system is something that we could do, and we just haven't been able to. There's still some expense to that we haven't executed yet, but we are definitely looking at it. I'd love to be able to provide those captions in potentially multiple languages, but we're working on some partnerships to make that happen. But it is something we're actively looking at. Now, next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. As our community grows, do we need a written code of conduct to mitigate the inevitable conflicts and issues?
I go with Bill.
From day one, Alex has set one. It may not be written down, but we all understand it pretty well. And I think it was one of the smartest things that he did here. We've only lost, I can count on a finger or two the number of people who have come in, haven't abided by the code, and they're no longer here from the day that they, Alex gave them enough warnings and said, keep doing this and you're not going to be a part of this. And that happened. And it kind of was a good signal to all of us that we needed to stay within those margins, clean show, all the rest of the things that we talk about here. And it really has helped us to have those guidelines in place from the very beginning.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I was just going to say that early on when I joined a little over a year ago, I was convinced that I was going to be kicked off just because of the way I am very, very quickly. And Alex stopped, and I'll never forget him saying this. He said, "Don't be surprised if next year you're still here." So as far as the code of conduct goes, if you'd stray a little off the beaten path, my friends here will let me know that I'm straying off the path.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what happens is I will admit that I come from a family of lawyers, and so I'm very clear. And I was very as a child, I was a master of following the letter of the law and ignoring the spirit of the law completely. And so I know that when you start building lots and lots of little ticky-tack rules and codes of conduct, all those things, what happens is you're creating actually a bunch of gaps that people like me slip through. so we're like, well, you didn't say this and you didn't say that. And so I find working with people who try to work with the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law, I find tedious and annoying. So there is a spirit of, hey, we're all trying to work together. There's a handful of laws guidelines that let people know, we're not going to talk about religion. We're not going to talk about politics. We're going to be respectful in how we talk to each other. We're going to, not be misogynistic. We're going to be culturally aware. These are overall guidelines that are relatively easy and occasionally difficult. People step over those by accident, because of our own cultural limitations. And then we have those discussions and privately, sometimes publicly, of, hey, let's not go down that path, and there's idioms that we use that seem simple to us, but do not mean the same thing to everyone else. And so we have to learn how to, be more effective at that and how to be a global community. But I think that it's important that we, if we start creating like a rule for everything, it actually will make it harder to manage, not easier. That's been my experience over building communities over the last 30 years, is that it doesn't make it better. And so people think it will. What it makes it is more litigious. There's some very large guidelines that are fairly strict and actually more strict than almost any other community I know of online. And it has allowed, those hard guidelines have allowed people from all different backgrounds and all different countries and all different, walks of life to interact with each other seamlessly. And I think that's a pretty big achievement, for what we've done. Without all the little ticky-tack rules. And so I think that, usually what happens is when there's a conflict, then what there is to do is have a discussion about it. But I also find that the rules that I've set up create an environment that is difficult if you're not looking at the whole how to serve the entire community or how to be part of a community. The rules that we've created are usually enough to scare you off, and that's the point. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Most of the mistakes I make, I didn't know they were mistakes until I made them, and I was clued in. So there's a nice component of, I guess patience would be the word to use, and helping, so that when I make them, I mean, I had a tough time with pronouns in the beginning. I'm sorry, I'm just come from a different era, and pronouns are something to be, concerned about these days. And I've literally been trained away from mistaking and using the wrong pronouns. So that's just one little thing. But I appreciate the guidance that I get just being here every single day.
Go ahead, Bill.
A written code of conduct leads to a homeowners association, and nobody wants that. Period.
Exactly. I was out of some weird situation. My house, there's like 4 houses on my block that are not in the homeowners association, and mine happens to be one of them. And I just think it's hilarious because I talk to my neighbors about the insanity of a homeowners, and I just think to myself, well, I don't need the pool. Anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and as Mitch learned once again today, sometimes you swerve outside the guidelines, and if you hear Alex say "don't" followed by 3 evers, ever, that moves from guideline to rule. So just bear that in mind.
If you saw me wince,
one of those at the top of the show.
If you saw me wince, you know the impact of that.
So anyway, yeah. So I mean, we call them when we call them along, and we make the guidance as we go through it. But it's also, I think that the thing that you find with almost everybody that sticks with office hours is people are coming from a good place. So I may say, don't ever, in a moment of frustration, but we all know that, that people don't stay here very long if they're not looking out for everybody. Next question.
Next question in from Jesse Mills in San Francisco Bay Area. Has a 1-hour format been considered? Subjectively, it's quite a challenge to watch or rewatch 2 hours of material to find an answer. A 1-hour format would also motivate people to be more prepared, succinct with answers and responses.
Go ahead, Jeff.
And actually, I don't know, Alex, maybe you want to go first in terms of the actual direction of the show, but I've got some suggestions I can throw out there of how I watch the show.
Yeah, go ahead. How do you watch the show?
Okay. So, for those of us on the U.S. East Coast, of course, the show is in the middle of the workday. So sometimes I can be on the panel. Sometimes I can loosely participate and throw some questions out there, and I'm listening to it in the background while I'm doing other things, or it's just open on a window on another monitor. And sometimes I can't at all, but I love the fact that it is both live streamed and also recorded on YouTube. I, for a whole host of reasons, can't recommend the paid YouTube Premium enough because it lets you do a number of things. It lets you download big shows like a 2-hour YouTube show to your mobile device. It also lets you play something live streaming or otherwise with your phone locked. So put your phone in your pocket, and whether you're driving or commuting or anything else, you can play the show. Of course, you can also run Zoom mobile, which I do sometimes. And I mentioned the YouTube chapters previously. That's the great thing about watching it kind of on demand on YouTube, is you don't have to watch the whole 2 hours then. If they're talking about a subject that you have absolutely zero interest in, fast forward, and you can click on those or tap on those chapter marks, which actually tell you what question is about to be answered. So it's great. You can kind of skip through that stuff and only watch as much or as little of that day's episode you care about.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, just a follow-up to that. Downy and its companion transcoder Permute allow for an incredibly efficient workflow that is practically no clicks to be able to just grab and consume at will pretty much any part of it. So I don't think we're going to change the format, but it's good feedback.
It is a 1 hour format. It's just two next to each other, 2 1 hour sessions. So we do, there's 1 hour of Q&A, and then there's 1 hour of a subject that's specific to what people want. In fact, we started with a 1 hour session. So it was, when it first came out, we met for an hour. And the problem that we had is if we wanted to talk about anything specific, this was before we had the second hour. The second hour was added as an addendum to the first hour, so that we found that we wanted to speak about something for, a half an hour or an hour. But we also we wanted to be here, especially during COVID. We wanted to be here for people to answer their questions while they're trying to figure out virtual production, while they're trying to figure out media production. We wanted to make sure that there was ample time for them to ask the questions right now. And then we created a second hour so that there was something to focus on. That we could cover something specific for the second hour. People don't have to stay for that. We were like, you don't have to stay for it, but we'll create another hour. But we're going to start off with Q&A. The velocity of our answers is actually, on average, very fast. So when I work on productions with, 4 to 6 people, I usually manage clients' expectations that we can get through anywhere from 12 to 14 questions an hour. That's usually what it's going to take for us to get through, and that's what you can expect when I talk to clients. Our average is in the mid-20s. So our high end is in the mid-30s. Our low end is typically not less than 20. So usually it's not less than an average of every 3 minutes that we answer a question on average. The velocity of our answers is directly related to the number of questions that we have when we start the show. So when we have I will press down on, the panelists can tell you when they're here that I lock questions faster. They get a lot more. For those of you listening, if you hear me go, yep, that means stop. That means stop. like, okay, we're done. And we need to move on, or we need to close this up. And so that's the, but we're accelerating those things. Sometimes at the very beginning of the show, you'll have me tell the panelists, hey, we've got a lot of questions. Let's be focused. And when we have very few questions at the beginning, less than 10 or 12, then I usually give us a little bit more range to talk a little bit slower. But it's actually when we enter the hour with more than 15 questions, you typically will hit 30 answers, and that's because the panelists tend to be more disciplined, everything else, and so a lot of that has to do with, and when you talk about getting the most out of this as a viewer, the best way to get the most out of it is ask the questions early. We reset, to be safe, we'll say 6 p.m., but 4 p.m. Pacific Standard is when it's designed to reset. So when it'll reset that time at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. After that, you should be able to ask questions for the next day. But if you want to wait a little later into the evening or first thing in the morning, if you're somewhere else in the country, you can ask those questions. And when we get them ahead of time, what I do before the show is I sit down and I have coffee and I read through those questions about 6 o'clock. So about 6 o'clock, I'm reading through the questions. I'm doing a little bit of research. I'm thinking about things how I want to answer it. And so the questions that get asked before 6 a.m. and then I do another pass of it, but not quite as deeply before 7 a.m. So if you want to get the most out of it and you have questions, get them in early, because definitely gives us more time to see them and prepare for them. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think this is perfect because we're all off the top of our head in the first hour to a certain degree. We do get to look at things ahead of time and kind of read up, and if there's something we want to show or talk about specifically, kind of order our thoughts. But we never know what's coming in, particularly while the show is going on. Questions are still coming in, and so we have to be agile to answer those. We all know that we can do a better job if we have some advanced warning. That second hour, though, is a different thing because we know the focus and we can pay attention to what do I need to know about that area to just formulate better responses for people.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, and if you don't have the chance to watch the show live, just go to YouTube and enter the search term Office Hours Global, and you'll get a list of the shows by topics of the second hour here. Like you can see here, you even see upcoming shows. It'll list the topics of the second hour, like tomorrow, Ruthless Reviews Audio. And then it lists the topic of the second hour for each show that it finds in the search database. So that's one good way to go through a topic and find a topic that you might be interested in that has already been archived on the YouTube and find it that way. And then if you have further questions after watching one of those archived shows, that's what you can use Discord for, so that you can say, I saw on show 262 about this item. Can you elaborate on that? If you can find any of us that are willing to answer in the Discord. So that's a way to follow up.
And I lost it. All right, next question. I was thinking of something that I wanted to add there, but I can't remember what it was. Sorry.
Josh Kaufman from Pittsburgh, PA asked the question, what would you say to someone who feels they don't have anything to contribute on the panel? Office Hours trade show, working on the Office Hours production back end, etc.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I think the first thing you need, and maybe the second thing you need, is enthusiasm and consistency. And remember, this is a two-way street. It's not always what you have to offer. It's what you have an interest in learning more about.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, that's very true. And there's nothing that says you have to be on the panel to benefit from office hours. And you yourself mentioned the fact there's all sorts of backstage stuff that you can learn a lot from. Those of us who are on the panel find this satisfying for some reason. Partially, it's probably because we've been looking at and studying things for many, many years. And this provides an opportunity for us to turn around and use some of that experience to help the people who are coming up or just are new to that subject maybe get a leg up. And that is something that most of us wish we had when we're getting into the business. Somebody to answer questions and help us get over the obvious things to accelerate our learning. And that's all we're doing here, is trying to do that. So no requirement to come on and do it, but if you can, please join, because it's a great thing to do for people.
Go ahead, Jason.
The panel represents a tiny sliver of the expertise that you will find in after hours and in the Discord server and in the community writ large. So I would say don't worry about it. And, if you find a niche and that is not the panel, you'd actually be in the majority.
Yeah, and all of these things contribute to. That's the thing, to get what you get out of office hours is usually what you put into it. So following along and trying some of the stuff out that we're talking about, jumping into the teams is one of the most powerful ways to do it, because it requires many of them to start with. There are definitely positions that require skill. Many of them to start with do not require a specific vertical skill. They just require dedication, and the willingness to learn is really what those require. And you get to meet with a lot of other people and learn how to do those things. And so, getting involved in those are, very powerful. And then at some point, if it makes sense to be on the panel is just one thing to do. Now, there's plenty of other places to contribute. Just answering people's questions or even asking questions in Discord helps you get something out of it, helps everybody else get something out of it, keeping those channels active. And then look at what's happening after hours and just being part of that conversation. Next question.
Kenny Hampton, Greenville, Illinois. Yes, special thanks to the back-end staff for their dedication to the production while still managing their daily jobs. Index markers to daily questions in the YouTube stream. Just one useful feature which lives on after the live stream.
Good, Bill.
I'm just going to say it. Those of you who don't understand how much amazing work is done by our back-end crew, it is astonishing. It makes me drop my jaw every day to see how many really talented, really good people, and just people of good heart, are behind the scenes making this show work. So please do note some of those names on the end of the show. This would not be the same place without that amazing cadre of volunteers back there.
And the last question, we're running a little over, but we started a little late, but we're going to go ahead and end right now. Last question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, PA, asked what design elements and procedures of office hours demonstrate that the community is the focus of office hours?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Quickly say that some of the smallest things are actually the things that took the most amount of time to create, but there's quite a bit of dedication to make every tiny little bit work.
Yeah, the almost everything is designed around the community. so when you look at it, whether it's Discord or the event chat or the panelists or the productions, I mean, it's really designed around the community working with each other to make all of these things happen. It's not just it. It's designed to generate community by giving people opportunities to contribute to that community, and that is the design from day one. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the fact that we list our locations, both in the panelists' names and for every person that asks a question, we mention where they're from. And this reinforces the fact that this is a global community. And it lets you know when people are asking questions or people are answering questions, where those people are, and lets you associate those people with that certain community in your country or your neighborhood.
Flawless traversal for today, 91,719 miles, 147,607 kilometers. So we almost got to 1K today. And so that's the United parameter. So anyway, well done. And thank you to the producers for all the great questions, both in the first and the second hour. Thanks to the panelists. Of course, can't do this without you. And so it's great to have all of you here. Everyone's looking great. We're going to be sounding great for tomorrow. We're going to have our ruthless review of each other's audio. And also thanks to the incredible team that is putting together this show every single day. And some of them are working on it live. Some of them are working on it in prep. Some of them are working on it in post. And so definitely take a look at the credits that go by. It's a lot of people. It takes a little village to get this off the ground every single day, 7 days a week. So thank you. We appreciate your contribution. All right, time to jump into After Hours.
That was a really fast hour. So much for
it. I thought it was
short.
I saw a couple questions and I was like, oh, this is going to end at 8:15. Every once in a while we get in there and there's like 5 questions. I'm like, no, this is going to be a really short trip. Next thing we know, we're over time. So that's what happens.
Say we don't have enough questions. We have more than enough questions. I don't understand it.
Yeah, you have to account for the bloviation factor.
Exactly.
Resemble that remark.
#opinion bloat.